Good morning. Today it is Wednesday, October 25th, 2023. It is 9:24 a.m. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the Board of County Commissioners 2024 through 2025 biennium budget deliberations. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have interim county manager Robin Campbell, as well as our budget team. And we are continuing on with deliberations today. And
yes, before we
to
begin, thank you,
Manager
Commissioner. So I do want to make an announcement about the technical difficulties we are having. We are doing our best to live stream these meetings. However, what we have found is that we have equipment that doesn't talk to each other. And so we know that the broadcasts are choppy at best. What we've done is we are recording every one of these meetings, and the recordings should be okay. And we are getting those posted no later than the day after the meeting. And we have also converted our Zoom meetings to webinars and distributed the link throughout the county. So if county elected officials or appointed directors or financial staff all have the link, and you are free to share that link to sign in to be able to watch these in real time. So we're doing everything we can. We're trying to figure out exactly what the part is that needs to be ordered. We don't know how long that will take, so we will continue to set up meetings in this way for the near future.
perfect. Thank you.
Are you going to mention that it's a one-way proposition as far as, I don't think we're here to have dialogue.
Oh, yes. So these meetings, they are of course open to the public, as all your meetings are. However, these are not opportunities for public comment or for the board to receive comment. So everyone is invited to watch and follow along. You can certainly send emails. I know financial staff have sent emails to the budget team when they hear the board asking questions so that we can share information as quickly as possible, but this is not an opportunity for the board to receive comments.
Yeah, the way that Jamie has set up the Zoom, she has set it up as a webinar, so attendees can watch the meeting, but they can't.
Right. Right, and we do appreciate everyone that listens in.
Yeah, okay. So, Nicole?
This morning, to continue with deliberations, we have Maria from HR, or the HR director, and we have Tara also from HR to speak about personnel-related requests that we have within the budget. We're going to look at the policy level pay increases, so that is looking into the comp and class study. And then we're also going to look into policy level reclass. These are all the positions that departments and offices have put in where they've asked for a reclassification. Before I hand it over, Robin, is there something else you'd like to frame?
I just want to say that we might not go down these line by line. We're going to give Maria an opportunity to talk a little bit about the comp and class study and then comment on these packets as a whole rather than going to each individual one. As you know, we have not completed our bargaining agreements with the unions yet. We are very close, but there's still no signed agreements with some of our unions. So we want to be very careful about what is said in an open meeting that would potentially be considered an unfair labor practice. So
Robin, I appreciate that. framing it that way. Good morning, Commissioners. I think I'll start this morning just talking about career ladders. I know that there was an interest in having that discussion and what work the consultant did. It'd be helpful to define what a career ladder is so that we all have a mutual understanding. And so basically a career ladder is levels within a job family. So I'll use the office assistant. So we have office assistant 1, 2, and 3. And the consultant looked at those and what employees stated that they were doing. And what some of the work that they did was to ensure that it was very distinguishable, a 1 versus a 2 versus a 3. So if I'm a 1, I know, okay, in order to reach this level 2, I have to master X, Y, Z. Not all career ladders have an automatic promotion or progression, and I think that's some of the interest with our stakeholders. They have positions they'd like to bring in at a trainee level, give them the on-the-job experience that they need or provide them whatever opportunities to get certified. And after reaching certain milestones, the desire is to reclassify them or promote them automatically. That's a policy level decision on the board. We've got a couple of examples that I can give where we have some, not necessarily automatic progression, but where we have the ability for employees to come in, learn the work, and one of them is in the auditor's office. At the end of the day, the auditor, she retains the authority to decide like how many level 3s she need in her licensing and recording, providing the training to employees, they get to do the testing, and then in order to reclassify a 2 to a 3, it does come before the board. We have a second example in Public Works, and that's our utilities operators. They're only hired at the level 1 because there's such a specialized need for certain certifications, I think, in sewer and water. And then they have a certain amount of time to accomplish those certifications, and once they have them, then they're promoted. So in order, yes.
Between automatic and coming to the board, isn't there a middle ground where it's subject to the department or our elected officials' discretion? So therefore, it's not coming to the board, but it's not just automatic. If they've got 23s, they don't have to promote someone. But the steps are there for the discretion of the department head to use. Is that a thing?
That's a thing is it an auditor's office?
Yeah, so the auditor's office, they actually have, I think it's still in MOU or maybe an addendum that lays out the steps that have to be taken for the employees to promote that. But once all that has happened, the auditor has signed off, those don't have to come before the board. The auditor does have the authority under that addendum to the contract to basically reclass those positions and promote the employees.
Is there a way that can, or that policy can be applied at a county level? Right? Because we got a couple of them, and for example, I know the assessor goes through kind of the same system, and that comes in front of the board every single time, or is it strictly union negotiated? And
So it's going to depend. So in the assessor's office, those positions are union. So as we did with the auditor's licensing and recording career ladder, we would meet with the union because they're going to have an interest in knowing what are those milestones? What do the employees need to accomplish in order to get there? For non-represented, we wouldn't have that process necessarily, but you know, for parity reasons, we'd want something fairly similar. And as I've stated before, and I think during my budget presentation, getting to write policy is one of those things that we really should do, but because we're always reacting to some other urgency or, you know, other priorities. Union negotiations have taken the last year, right? Like that's consumed us. So we haven't had that opportunity to delve into how we would develop a framework for an in training. So how do we bring in, one of the discussions we had was a senior budget analyst. And when you see applications and you see, oh, this would be a good budget analyst, not quite senior, how can we bring these people in at a lower level give them on-the-job training and let them meet these milestones, and then make a decision to promote. It would not necessarily be automatic. So we need to have that mechanism in place so that it's fair and equitable. Management knows what to expect and employees know what to expect. So it's really about time in developing that. Okay. So just in terms of the class and comp project, as I said before, it's been quite a monumental undertaking. The consultant finalized their report late May, presentation to the commissioners in June, and HR was directed to, estimate what it would cost to implement the study. Frankly, it was a very short time period between mid-June and early August when we had to have it into the Questica system. But we came up with some cost estimates. What we haven't had the opportunity to do is, again, any positions that are changing in pay that are in a collective bargaining unit, we have to negotiate that with the union. But we've been so focused on our collective bargaining agreements that we've had discussions with some of the unions about, let's revisit this in 2024, because they have an interest not only in providing additional data, right? Like, nobody was happy with the results of the compensation study, just to be perfectly honest with you. And so I've received additional information saying, consider this, consider that. But that's been very time consuming. And the union and management, we have an interest in, for instance, hard to fill, or where we've got recruitment and retention. But that takes time to really sit down and look at the data and come to some agreements. So globally, yes, I would love to see us be able to implement it. It's just that precision of the positions and not having had the opportunity to vet it by management. It's really important that HR works with our leaders and managers to get their perspective. And then we have to meet with the unions. And we haven't had that opportunity, but we did go ahead as requested, and we put in some cost estimates. I know Tara and I worked a lot of hours, including weekends, to try to provide you that. We also did it in phases in the event you wanted to implement a portion of it versus the entirety of it. There's pros and cons to that, but one of the biggest cons and the concern we should all have is paying people differently to do similar level work. And so it has challenges, and we have time constraints because you have decisions to make. So with that,
Can you talk real quick about, can you talk about the phases, like when you say you put it into phases,
okay.
how did you do that? Like what would phase 1 be versus phase 2?
So phase 1, so as you saw in the report, there were positions that the consultant went to market said these positions are lagging, so we're not competitive. We're not in that 95 to 105. I think somewhere around 90%. So we took those and said, okay, if we bring those up to 100% of the market, what would that cost? But then we also have to look at that job family. So I'm going to say if a widget maker 2 was 10% behind in the market, then we have to adjust the widget maker 3 and the widget maker 1, and if there's a widget maker supervisor, so we try to align those job families so that there would be enough of a spread, what we call that differential, 5% usually between the ranges. So we did that as a phase 1. Phase 2 is where it became a lot more complicated because that's when the JDs came into play. So when the consultant did the market study, they recommended, if you'll recall, one salary chart versus we have 6 to 8 salary charts. And so based on if this specialist 1 scored at a 108, then you would find 108 in that salary chart, and that's where you would place it. In some cases, that you would see an increase. So the bulk of the expense of implementing that phase two is because it captured. So they benchmarked around 105 positions. We have around 255 classifications. So the bulk of those are in phase two. And I'll have to say that is deep as I've dived into this, it's complicated. It's not something where you can just have a 10-minute discussion and really like the light bulbs are going to go off. And then phase three has to do with our management and technical positions. Probably all of us, most of us sitting here around this table, we're in an open range. And so what that means is this position's paid $5,000 to $7,000, and you come in and place anywhere in that range, and then they can move up based on their MTP raises up to 4%. So there's not consistency like a range 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what the consultant said for consistency purposes, you should put them into a step plan. And so then we looked at all our MTP and our at-will, and we plotted them into basically a range and step, and that's phase three. So in some cases, that crosswalk means that certain positions would see an increase in pay, even though maybe they were at market. It's just how the step-in plan was, it's 5% pay progression, and so anyways, it gets rather complicated. That's phase three.
Okay, on phase 1 and 3, I think I understand. On phase 2, so you're putting everyone into one salary chart?
Well, so the one salary chart would require lots of negotiations with the union. So
That's what I was gonna ask.
yeah,
How does that fit with the unions and our?
so we haven't negotiated any of that. What we tried to do was, Tara and I in brainstorming was like, okay, what if we took their recommended salary chart and overlaid what we already have and try to calibrate it in a way? And so that's how we came up with numbers. You know, we tried to get as creative. So again, not an exact science.
It's exactly what we did all summer in the sentencing guidelines subcommittees, trying to take the old sentencing grid and overlay it and then see how much it matched up and just like, yeah, it's absolutely not a science. It's like really.
Well, I'm glad you have a little bit of
I
experience.
get a sense of how you do. You're just trying to like calibrate like one grid to another grid, looking for the least the closest matches, and yeah, it's kind of a bizarre
What
exercise.
that
But
exercise was.
Yes, and you may recall that some of our ranges have 6 steps, some have 10 steps.
Some have 2.5% increase in steps, some have 3. From step 9 to 10, it's 5%. There is nothing that's consistent. And that's what part of the consultant is saying. You should get consistency across all these salary plans, but that is a huge, huge lift.
Right, and we should be able to say if someone's in a range 5, step 8, you should be able to easily look it up, and yet we're not. We need to know what pay plan they're in, which union they're
That's
in,
right.
which it's extremely, our pay is extremely complicated. It's not a bad thing, but it's extremely challenging and not necessarily ensuring parity across our employees.
But it does somewhat recognize the uniqueness of each position. If you rate people differently because of their job, qualifications and
well,
everything. So I don't know how you could get them all,
I wouldn't
how would you get them
agree
all
with that.
together?
Well, through this massive effort that Maria's describing, but I've got to say, perhaps other jurisdictions have that kind of challenge, but I know at the state you had one set of ranges, and they were all 10 steps, and it was 2.5% between every step, and there wasn't this for every kind, and it's not like there wasn't a
Federal government.
wide variety of,
They do something like that as well.
that's exactly right. Large organizations have consistent pay plans.
I've experienced where, depending on what the position is and the interests of the people involved, like everyone's like becomes a brilliant lawyer. It's like they can either argue that their position is exactly like the position analogous, or they can completely distinguish it and say, this is why I'm totally different than that. You know, like if there's an out of jurisdiction comp that shows that, well, I'm different than that. I don't do it that person. But then if there's an out of jurisdiction comp that's higher, like that's exactly what I'm doing. And so it's very, people can get, I mean, there's just so, I mean, a job is so complex and everything's unique and every county is unique and every department's unique. So saying that a administrative assistant is an administrative assistant is an administrative assistant, you can say that, but the person that doesn't want that to be true can talk about 1,000 different ways their job is different than the other administrative assistant. So it just ends up being, you're just chasing your tail around.
Exactly. And thank you for that insight, because that's exactly what it is. Everything we do at Thurston County is slightly different than, you know, the jurisdictions that we use as comparables. So that's why at the end of the day, it really is up to the three of you to decide, like, yes, let's implement the study, or let's do this and let's do that. But we can look to other jurisdictions for some level of guidance. But what also gets complicated is the more data we have, right, like the better that we're able to come to that middle ground. But employees want to look to a specific, my job should get paid what Lacey's paying, because they're the highest paid. My job is different, but I think I should get what Pierce County is paying, right? And so what we do is we use multiple counties and our local cities, and we find the average of that. And, you know, if we're at 100%, then we're in market. If we're below 95, we're out of market. And if we're above that, we're leading in the market. And so all of that, you know, one of the great lessons I've learned is more transparency and educating employees at every level on how pay is set. It's not just cherry picking the jurisdiction that pays the most. And you're hearing a lot of that right now is, you know, we're losing people to this place because they're paying more. Well, that may be true, but we would always be chasing the people that are paying more, right? And we'd be constantly changing our pay if that was a strategy that we took.
So we've heard a lot of criticisms of the study. The data was old. The market has changed. They didn't pick the right class for my classification. They didn't pick the right comparables. They would, doesn't matter who you talk to, there was something wrong with the study. And I think the reason for that is that people were surprised that we are not significantly under the market in most cases. So,
In timing, I mean, we started talking about doing a class and comp study in late 2019. And everything has changed, right? And so things are moving quickly, and so the lens through which people are seeing this is very different. It's like, well, high inflation, I should be getting 10 or 15.
Yeah, someone came in and said, well, the data is old. It's like, that was from 9 months ago. And I was just, it's like, that person that said that wasn't wrong, but it's like, how could you expect a government to fund, you know, find a consultant, do a comprehensive study, come up with a report, and have commissioners act in less than 9 months? Like, like if that's the standard, 9 months is too old, then we can never do it, because there's no other way it could have gotten done any faster. And like you say, if you're changing your pay plan every 9 months, that's not a sustainable way to do business.
right.
So I was just kind of like, yeah, that just kind of made me feel like my hands, you know, like there's no solution to this. If you can't even rely on data from 9 months ago. to make decisions.
And what consultants will do is, through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they collect a lot of compensation data, including for governments. And they'll age that pay structure to, just for that reason. So that, you know, because they do look at a point in time, and so it's a year later now. Okay, so we'll add 5%, right? We'll increase this by 5%. So that's how we can deal with that, but it's never going to be 100% precise, because I don't think there's like not anything that is that set in stone. It's there's a framework around compensation, but it's not a hard science.
It's a time-consuming process. Like I was being told, we had not done one in like 20 years. And why hadn't we done one? Well, because it's an expensive and time-consuming process.
And
I mean, I'm
controversial,
assuming I
as you
wasn't
can
here
see.
but you know, I assume that if it was easy and cheap and easy to do, you'd do one every 2 or 3 years, but that's not the case.
Rob, go ahead.
Well, thanks. Just a point. I think also, you know, regardless of the structure you come up with, it's never static, right? Every time you may go out for a classic comp study to kind of look at the overall picture of it, but each year and every year that you're looking at any type of wage scale adjustments, you know, that it is constantly moving. So hopefully you are maintaining your connection to market along the way.
Right, and we do market studies each year that we do bargaining. When we do bargaining,
Yes.
not a big compact glass study,
Not
but comparable markets.
not county-wide, but we'll usually take a look at union positions, and then we then incorporate non-represented in order, again, to keep that parity. So that we're not paying people to do the same work more or less, just based on whether they're represented or not represented. And I've seen counties that actually, where I've gone to pull data and I'll see that represented make more or less than unrepresented. And I think that creates a lot of morale issues.
Right, so there's a recommendation that is in accordance with the conversations that are being had with the union to delay the implementation of the study.
Talk about it in 2024, and, you know, if we can get to agreement, I don't know, through budget amendments, if we can come in and say, let's implement, you know, because we have done a lot of work and we need to continue the work on this. I don't want to see this work just get shelved somewhere and collect dust. It's been too, there's been too much investment at every level for that to happen.
I mean, I know there's been criticism at every level, but I guess, has there been particular criticism leveled at the classification work, or with those, like, was that more acceptable to folks than maybe the pay recommendations? I mean, is there
The
a piece of
actual
that might have,
classification specifications?
the trying to get I know there's a classification, like trying to align certain job descriptions and stuff, so, and that's part of what we were trying to accomplish.
So,
And adjusting the qualifications.
yeah,
Was that
so
was that equally controversial, I guess is my question?
I don't think so, but partly, I've been going through those changes and to do some quality checking, and then to present those to management, to have them look at it and say, does this make sense? So one of the things I'm checking for is if there's a degree requirement, is that necessary in substituting experience? Because we know that degrees can create artificial barriers to somebody being able to apply. So unless you're an attorney or a nurse where you have to have a certain degree, we're substituting, and that was direction given to the consultant. So I'm making sure that that actually made it into the minimum qualifications. And we're also looking to make sure that our qualifications aren't onerous, right? Like, what's the minimum that an employee needs to be able to do to learn the job? Because they're not going to come in having mastered the job. So we don't want to create artificially high qualifications. So I don't think that part has been controversial, primarily because I haven't actually, I'd like to put them on a SharePoint so that managers can come in, look, and comment.
So would it be possible to implement the classification part of the study without the compensation piece?
The reason I would say no overall is that some of the classifications will see pay increases, and that we need to have that conversation with the unions. And because these are probably significant changes, they would come before the board for adoption. Thurston County has some pretty strict position control, I guess. And so these things always come before the board unless there's a small administrative change. But in the most part, we're looking at some significant minimum qualification changes. So eventually it'll come before the board. And then if there's a commensurate pay range, then that'll be brought together as a package.
I guess one comment is that I think it is better, for at least for me personally, if and it's not going to be this year, probably maybe next year, but we look at, to the extent possible, we look at it as a package. Because when we get piecemealed, we get one, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, and at a certain point, I feel like,
Gets overwhelming.
It's hard to know, it's hard to see whether you're being responsible to the public. It's like, have I granted too many of these? Or does this one fit in with the one I did 6 months ago? I mean, if you can see it together, then I can say, okay, this is consistency, this is comprehensive, this is fair, and we can afford the aggregate costs, if we can. And then you can make that decision, especially when we've got this data kind of all at once. Because anytime we get piecemealed like that, it all sounds good, and then one after another, and you don't get a sense of, you lose perspective on the cumulative effect of what you're doing month after month after month.
So, okay, I mean, we can certainly work at least, even if it's just job families or two
Yeah,
things,
maybe one,
larger
just
rather
however
than
you can package
ones to
things so that we
twosies.
can deal with them in a little bit bigger groups helps me feel more comfortable about what my decisions I'm making.
No. Commissioner Edwards, do you have any questions? I have.
No, I think that makes sense.
So,
Wait.
go ahead.
No, just to make sense to wait on this deal. It's gonna be
Yeah.
18 months older by the time we get there, I suppose.
Okay, so then I guess what I'm hearing is maybe this will be brought up next year in a budget amendment for us to have a discussion. And then, we've heard, the request for it, maybe a work session is needed to kind of just come back to this and kind of provide a little bit more of a breakdown. And of course, the two new commissioners will need a kind of a refresher on all the work that you've done, so. And-
Right, and to bring it back to the budget decisions that you need to make this week. So one of the packets before you is the pay increase packet. At the risk of being, I'm gonna go out on a limb, Maria's gonna tell me if I need to stop. Are court commissioners considered in the comp class study?
So, I had consultants, so I included the court commissioners, but they're not in a pay range. There wasn't like that data for them to collect, but what was, and they're not represented, so I think it's fair to say that our court commissioners are paid 85% of what the judges are paid, but almost all the other, and I can't recall which one didn't, but the other counties, they're paid at 90% of judges' salaries. So when we did the cost estimates, that wasn't included in what we input into Questica. So it wouldn't be
All
double
right,
covered, so if
it's
the
part of-
commissioners.
It would be part of the study implementation to do this particular items included in the study. It
So when we
wasn't-
did put into Questica, we didn't, budget for the court commissioner to
You did
90%.
not All right. So then this is a standalone item to bring the court commissioners to 90%. And they are currently at 85%.
Looking,
So I'm on this packet. Gonna come back,
unless I thought I found it.
right? And it's the very first item. And the court is asking you to take compensation from 85% of the judge's salary to 90%,
I thought,
which would cost 56,000 a year roughly. 55,000 a year.
What we're suggesting maybe that we wait and include that in the rest of the activity.
That is what I'm asking if your preference would be. It was not included, these common class lines, phases 1, 2, 3. We're definitely recommending that you wait on those. And I'm asking if you want to wait on these other items as well.
My question would be, why not?
didn't the judges get a pay raise? Will automatically be pay raise for the commissioners?
85%, yes.
So, as we're,
I know for this year
So
on this.
this is a no to the increase to 90% until we consider the class comp study.
and do the whole.
Well, there's one other thing that is kind of unique.
Washington State
Yes.
University.
So, B 2703 is the WSU. What happened here, this had nothing to do with the comp class study. The county and the WSU for the director of our extension program, we have a contract, and what is being requested here, WSU increase their share, and they're asking that the county increases our share, so we're still providing an equal match for the director's pay. So
We've got a contract with WSU, so why would it just automatically?
$3,000. It's not an automatic thing, that's the board's prerogative to say no, but it's $3,000.
Yeah, I mean, the statement of needs says, this, you know, it's basically a legislative mandate, really. I mean,
There's an expectation on the part of the university that the county will pay an equal share.
And we want to keep that relationship.
I see where it is, but what are we actually doing? Why are we jumping around to
So-
these different items?
Because,
Sorry, sorry.
so we can walk through this short list and say yes, no, but
You're just taking us to ones where you think there's a
there's actually a decision
discretion
to be made.
point?
Yeah,
I'm good on the Washington State.
okay, so that's a yes. And then I am, so I am jumping around a bit, and I apologize
Well, as long as
for
there's
that.
method to the madness, I
Yeah.
just wasn't sure what it was.
Nicole, could you speak to BO 713, the Judge Pro Tem pay?
I don't know. I'll have to look at it here.
Was that addressed in?
Bringing the this is increasing the pro tem pay from $50 an hour to
That's right,
100.
they wanna
$100 an
increase
hour
the-
to make it more in line with what other jurisdictions are paying their pro tem judges.
We have a extremely low, and that has nothing to do with the comp class study.
They want to change it. How much? What was the difference?
What do they want to raise it to?
To 100.
To 100. They
So
want to
they're-
double the amount. They
And
have
then-
a hard time according to the court's finding.
And they set this rate 11 years ago, so it has been a while since
Has
it's been updated.
I remember doing
What's the
that.
total, what's,
1,000. I'm willing to do 15,000, half, and
Raise it to 75.
raise it to 75.
and see if that'll bring folks to. And I'm willing to try it if we bump it up again. I don't know. I'm gonna kind of defer to Ty. He's
Yeah,
gonna-
well, I mean, it's a totally reasonable request. I mean, but I'm looking to not increase any general fund, baseline this year. So if I wanted to try to make a counter argument, lawyers went from the time when I was doing lawyer contract work, it was $50. We went to 75. I think that's still where it stands. Patrick's got some flat rate contracts, but that's so low that with the Washington State Bar Association, that's pro bono. That satisfies your pro bono hours. That's like akin to working for free. And that's what we ask our lawyers to do. So, but on the flip side, I don't know anyone who does judge pro tem. You do it for the experience, like you're thinking about running for judge, you want to put it on your resume. No one's paying their mortgage doing judge pro temping, to my knowledge. It's something that lawyers do to get their name out there, to show, they're showing the rest of the judicial committee that they've got what it takes to be a good judge. And so it's really almost like an internship, you could call it. Now, I'm sure the number of hours has increased and there's a need to attract people that are willing to do it. So maybe Commissioner Mejia's proposal is a middle ground. At least they're getting what the lawyers are getting. I think $100 is frankly fairly reasonable, and I'd like to get them there maybe in the next few years as times improve. But is this the year to do this right now? I mean, it's been that way forever. This is not a must-do. None of these are must-dos. And I don't want to add non-must-do stuff that's got a significant budget impact this year. That's the only thing. I mean, it's an absolutely reasonable request for a judge to get $100 an hour for this work, but.
So maybe let's mark it as a maybe for 15, and then we see kind of as everything's adding up, and then we can review it back. So as a maybe for 15, and then we'll see kind of what the total general fund impact is towards the end.
So we'll return to that item, and then you're gonna say no for now to all the comp class. Okay, now let's look at the policy level reclass sheet.
which that we looked at, yeah, we've looked at it, what do
We
do?
skipped it yesterday.
So we've not looked at it. Policy level reclass.
Yeah.
Can you pull it up on the screen?
So on this one, many of these items were addressed in the comp and class study. Is that an accurate
19.
statement?
No, quite, well,
I'm not asking you to identify them, I'm just,
glancing through, some were, I want to say the majority were not.
so the decision for you here is these offices and departments have asked for an adjustment in range for their positions, or they've asked for certain positions to be reclassified from the widget maker 1 to the widget maker 3, or from a specialist 1 to a excellence 2. It's jumping all over the place. And one of the things that you have to watch out for that Marie noted earlier was sometimes there are specialist twos in many offices and departments. So if you move it for this department, then we're out of line with another department if there's someone in a similar class. So,
How are we ever gonna know?
well, that's the trick to this. If we're not running the comp class study, it really is a question of what do you want to do with all of these. And as a whole, I would recommend that we delay all of this
Till we do the comp.
till we do the comp class.
Well,
Is-
there's some here, so not that's to say that I'm not in agreement with you. But I know that, and here is rolled up the district court's reclassification, but then there's also some from public health, right, that don't affect the general fund. That I kind of was in agreement when David made the presentation. Because I understood his reasoning on that. And then the pretrial services one, it's actually, again, for the general fund, it's less.
If you'd like to go one by one down these lines, we've asked,
And then there's also the central services one, right? The reclassify radio technician to equipment mechanic, which, again, it's not going to the general fund, but it's, we did that action already. And did we take that action in a board meeting? So don't we have to actually
pay
address it?
investment.
So I think we do have to go,
Okay,
not to say that I don't
I'm
agree.
with Commissioner McDonough.
all right, let's do it then. Go ahead, Nicole, I'm gonna turn it over to you to go line by line. And so Nicole will explain the line and we'll ask Tara, who has this list, to identify if it was part of the comp class study.
Okay.
All right.
Line one, the assessor is asking to class their appraiser supervisor to range 15 to range 17. That this is needed if the commercial appraisal application is adopted. I believe we didn't approve the request for the salary for the commercial appraisal analyst. That was, but we did say we would make the classification and that you could do that at any time.
Okay, I have a question on this. So, we're gonna go through, let's just use this first one as an example. And we may or may not, but say we, okay, so we're gonna say, well, we agree with that, that needs to be done.
Yes.
But then, when we get farther down through this process, we're gonna say, but we need to cut your budget by X number of dollars. So it seems counterproductive for us to be going through here and picking out ones here and there that we think need to be addressed, when, why couldn't we just tell the elected official that, okay, if you think you need to do this, but recognize that your budget is being reduced by 4%.
I spoke to the prosecutor this morning who was making that same argument, and it's exactly what you're saying.
But I'm just trying to keep us from going through and, okay, we're gonna, okay this, and then we're gonna take it away here
I
with
was
this.
wondering why we had to go line by line
Yeah.
through these, like these.
I do too. I do not wanna
Because
micromanage these elected offices.
the board adopts what's called position control,
Yeah.
where you set the positions that are authorized to be filled
Yes.
and the pay associated with them. So we need to know if you're going to say yes to having something be in a range 15 or 17 instead of a 15. We need to know that so that we can put it on the,
Well, why can't he notify us that that's what he's doing?
Because there's gonna be
Because
a
the
budget.
board has to vote on it.
There's a budget impact to it, and so whenever there's a budget impact, like, that's our job, and,
Well, then before we even do this, let's make that determination. What are we gonna do on budget reductions? We told everybody 8%.
We need to know what you're saying yes to, so we know how much you have to make that reduction.
so, for example, number 2, the budget technical position reclass for the ERP, we already said yes to that. We went through a process and in a Board of County Commissioners meeting where we agreed to it and we approved it, and we knew that this budget impact was coming. So now that it's here, right, like, we have to, I see this as like, we're stuck, we have to do it. We already said yes to it in a official meeting, and
And I'm gonna repeat what I said yesterday, that I don't think this is a good organization of handling these, pulling reclasses out of all the different departments, pulling FTE increases out of all the departments, pulling all these different categories. It doesn't make sense in terms of enhancing our decision-making. I don't,
And that's kind of
this
where
is hard, I mean, this is really hard to just.
It's hard for me to rationalize this.
District court, there's a few in here, and I'm cross-referencing when we looked at district court, it's like, oh, I see, I said maybe on some and no on some, but I can't even go, I don't even have that context when we're gonna just talk about a reclass. Commissioner Mejia is pointing out that some of these we've already dealt with in the board and essentially made the
That would
decision.
be if the decision's already made, then
this is
it
a
really
mix of-
belonged in maintenance level.
Yeah, I mean,
which-
some of these are, this is a mix of all that, and I don't even
Right.
remember.
But-
I could never remember that I, all these reclasses, cause we do them one at a time, as I was saying before, like it makes it hard.
On the other hand, when offices and departments come forward, with reclass, they state that they're willing to absorb it.
yeah, so on
So-
number 2 and 13, those are the only ones that we've made decisions on already. And then for me, the rest, are kind of no, just because it's a general fund impact. I mean, I know that there's some public health and social services here, but I think those can also be addressed, when we're talking about the class and comp and address them at that time, unless,
I think, yeah, along with
So-
those ones.
so that's kind of where I'm at, is just approve the ones that we've already said yes to, unless that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes against the principle I laid out yesterday where I was like, okay, we're gonna be saying no to everything that's like it's medium or major, and I really wanted, if we can do little things that our budget does that help the departments work better, I kind of just wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, but that would mean going line by line through here, because some of these are significant. The district court ones, for example, on my sheet were no's for me, but a lot of these little dinky ones, it's like, do we need to do this to help them? Or is it something that they can do and absorb the budget? I mean, they gotta ask us for the position control portion of it, even if we don't fund it. So I don't know,
I'm just like, let's address this with the class, let's roll these in. I think that's just gonna be a better way for us to really address like all these different classifications. Because I was the same way for district court, for a lot of these, and it's just, I'm just seeing all these little ones add up to a whole lot of general fund is kind of what I'm seeing.
Yes, it does.
they do,
And-
it's a couple hundred
And then we're gonna
thousand.
turn around and cut it.
And
But
it's,
some of them are way littler than other, I'm just looking at, say.
and so I'm just, for me, I'm like, it's just,
Let me ask this question. Apparently we have said yes to 2 things on here. But did that yes go any farther? Hasn't equated into a different pay, today's payday for a lot of folks. So they're not getting paid any different today, are they?
Yeah, they are, because you already you took the
They
step.
are already,
But, and for the auditor in particular, she said she could absorb it this year. And for the central services item, it's a lower pay, and the position was vacant. We took the opportunity to reclass it into something else we need. So the pay is gonna be less. Whether you pass this or not, the pay is gonna be less. So it's a minor budget adjustment in central services. I would say it's a minor budget adjustment in the auditor's office. And the rest of these, either they were part of the class comp study and delayed for that, and the negotiating because they're part of the unions, or, with all due respect to district court, the concept that they brought forward was a pre-COVID concept that the state did not take action on. So now is absolutely, in my opinion, not the time to address the structure of district court.
And if we're gonna postpone the pay and comp process to get that finished, by then, we're going to have made these reductions in each one of these offices. And they might very well hold us back and say, well, we can't do this then. At that point, so we won't have to do it.
There was a reclass number 14 related to WSU, and I'm looking at our sheets, and we have a yes, no, maybe, commissioners. But I just making sure that we're not skipping over something we wanted to do.
Is that the one because of contractual obligation?
This is like Steven said he's got somebody working basically out of class, and I think is what he was describing.
Which line are you on?
14,
Page 7.
That's
county personnel working in the front office of WSU Extension does not allow for the full range of tasks required to support Extension program. Changing this to Administrative System 2 would align it with the critical duties required.
Have they had a HR review of the position?
Not that I'm aware, and I don't know if it would help. The ones that I identified here as not being part of the overall study. So like number 2, that's budget for technical position reclass for ERP. That was, sounds like maybe it was a decision. Number 3, that's part of their career ladder agreement. They're just asking for additional funding for that. That wasn't part of the study. And then 10 and 11, those are reclassification requests. From what I can tell, and
I mean, just looking at number 2 there, the auditor, I'm sorry, number 3. He originally had 2 yeses and a blank. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying that when we see them, when we saw them in the context of the auditor's request, it looked different than now that we're sort of pulling these different, and maybe this is a good thing to do, but it's just a totally different mindset.
It's a different way. It gives you a sense of the type of things that people are asking for across the county,
Yeah,
and an opportunity to say, yeah, we're gonna do reclasses, or we're gonna wait to do reclasses, or are you know, how do you wanna address them? And it's possible that you could, like, the auditor's doing this. She's asking for an increase in her budget of $12,000. How much is the auditor reverting every year?
Look that up.
They could,
Take it out of reversion.
I think they could absorb this additional cost, as they have been doing for years.
Well, I think the difference now is like we're facing cuts, right?
Yeah.
And then so it goes back, I think I marked yes because on some of these, because when they were presenting, right, I'm like, okay, maybe that's something, it looks small enough for the impact to the general fund is not gonna be big, yes. But then looking at all of them together and I'm seeing the big budget impact, I'm like, I'm not comfortable with it anymore.
Well, it's good to kind of see both. I'm just saying that when, you know, like, to me, it's traditionally, we've looked at, okay, here's everything the auditor wants. And we're not doing those things, and here are littler things that, you know, maybe
Yeah.
we can do to help them, because we're basically saying no. You pull everything apart like this, and you really don't see the impacts of your decisions on each different office.
But when you go down that list that you referred to, 2 yeses and a blank, well, my blank is because I'm not going with any general fund deal. That's what the whole thing was. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't do any. I think I did about 3 in there.
Yeah.
Because I'm just sticking to it. I mean, I don't see that we can do it. That's our situation.
Again, you could choose to allow the reclassifications for those that are less than, say, $10,000. And tell the office or department that they can continue to absorb the cost.
But they better get ready for a reduction in the
On top of
baseline.
that.
On
Yeah,
top
on
of
top
that,
I don't
Yeah.
see a negative to what Robin's proposed.
So if
Giving
there's.
them the option, they don't get the funding, but they get the ability to reclass the position if they can absorb costs under whatever.
Without raising the baseline budget.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
If they want the reclass, they can manage within
But we better
that.
tell them ahead of time what their reduction is.
Oh, believe me, they're all listening.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Seatmates are.
Things like, I mean, for public health, for example, they'll be able to absorb that.
Oh, yeah, it won't be any problem at all for
Yeah.
them.
They can absorb it.
So is it the 2 yeses for the decisions that have already been made? Or is that back to
Yeah,
no?
I mean, like, we made the decision, like,
We were out of sync when we made that decision. It's a
We
done
already
deal,
did
so
it.
what are you gonna do?
well, actually, the central services one, you get less anyways.
That's right. We're gonna pay,
We're gonna pay less.
It's gonna balance it out, huh?
oh yeah,
I bet
we're
it
gonna
doesn't.
balance it.
So it comes
It'll
up on
come through
2 and
on a
13.
60-40 split.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
Oh, some down on
Alright.
the rest of them?
So, we're gonna say,
So we're saying yes to the reclass, but not the budget.
If it's under,
so
If they wanna do
if
it.
we
it's
can
under-
contact the
cut.
office and department, other than the district court restructure, which is a significant amount of money, I would suggest for these small amounts, that you reach out to the offices and departments and say, we can process the class if they're willing to absorb the cost, we wouldn't increase the
After
budget
the
that
cut.
much.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's everything's after the cuts, it's in the final budget,
I'm okay with that if it's
all
legal.
right?
I guess, am I hearing it's legal?
So then we're not,
Absolutely legal. All right,
thank you.
thank you very much.
So then so we're not, can you explain kind of that? So
What we're about
not-
to do?
We're not increasing the base level, but they can,
Right.
They'll have to cut some.
We'll give the offices and departments the option.
giving them the position control piece that they're asking for, just not the money.
Right.
Got it.
Which is what we do in midterms anyway, right?
Yes. If people bring classifications to you all throughout the year, we've tried very hard to get folks to align their reclasses with the budget, so you can consider all of these things together, but we've not been able to herd those cats, if you will. So instead, you're asked to approve a reclass, and the offices and departments will say, I'll absorb the cost. Well, we're giving them that same option for the biennial budget.
Okay. So we'll reach out to the offices and departments and see if they'd like to do the reclasses and make sure it's on the position control.
Yep.
All right.
After they get the cut. Because once they get the cut, they're gonna, I think most of them are gonna say, I'm gonna withdraw
They'll
that.
wanna know how much their cuts are,
Yeah.
so it'll be toward the end of the week.
going to say there is a policy level tech package, and that was supposed to be if you approve the common class, you also needed to approve this packet, and so I just want to bring it to your attention that this is just a no,
The two-pager.
the two-pager. Yes.
So it's a no.
It's all right.
So what time are we starting with joint animal services?
10:30 is when they're scheduled.
Okay.
Five.
Yeah, we're gonna take 5. No, they're here. Okay. Okay, we are back from break. It is 10:40 a.m. and we're picking up with Joint Animal Services. And,
Good to pass it right over to
right,
Sarah.
okay, and we have Sarah Hawk, who's the Executive Director of Animal Services. And just pass it straight on to you, and we have the presentation up.
Excellent. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me today. I came here to talk about a couple of things, and one is which is to update you on everything that Animal Services has been doing over the last year. I did exactly what she told me not to do. So first, I wanted to talk about some of our accomplishments that we have done in 2023. And that is, first, we've actually managed to do over 200 spay and neuter surgeries in our newly formed surgery suite. So as most of you know, as either past or present commissioners on the Joint Animal Services Commission, we have been talking about our surgery suite for the last couple of years. And this year, because of the completion of the surgery suite in 2022, we were able to start doing surgeries in 2023. Along with that, we have also, this was all done with relief work, we have made a tentative offer for a veterinarian to join our team. 14% of our medical treatments and exams are performed in-house now. Again, as I have previously explained, without having a medical team on site, we were relying on the veterinary community to perform all treatments and spay neuter and any other surgeries that the shelter needed. And with the creation of the medical suite, as well as staffing to accomplish that, we have already hit goals that were key benchmarks in our 5-year strategic plan. We have also reduced euthanasia of feral cats by 5% this year with our newly formed community cat program, which also includes a placement of a 231%. Now, while that sounds really large, considering the reason why it's such a high percentage is because we weren't doing any kind of community cat program prior. It was also a big year for us in advocacy and legislation. We supported 2 bills in particular, and one was surrounding consumer protection with pet stores and the sale of puppies and kittens in pet stores. The other one was a cruelty bill that tightened up language that was already within the law to help clarify the rights of owners as well as seizure timeframes and the care of animals in shelters that are going through the court system. We've had a number of events this year as well, going up to over 20 events, being out in the community in different ways, anything from Cops and Kids to fundraisers at Top Rung Brewery, adoption events, as well as being out in different parts of the community talking about everything that Joint Animal Services has to offer. We also began a 24-hour emergency response in June. It was originally delayed because of staffing issues, but we have been responding to after-hours emergency calls since June 3rd. And the types of calls that we do respond to, of course, are what we consider emergencies. So that would be an agency assist. It would also be injured animals, anything that is an attack of a human being, and dog to human bites, as well as dogs attacking livestock. Those would be considered emergency responses for us after hours. Some challenges that we have faced in 2023. I'm not sure if any of you remember, but we had been facing a lot of challenges with our plumbing. And at the end of 2022, it came to a head, and in the beginning of 2023, we had to do a massive repair to our plumbing system, removing basically and replacing about half of the plumbing in order for it to continue to work. Prior to that, sewage was unfortunately backflowing into the building, and only one of 3 lavatories was working at that time. So that was one of our biggest challenges of 2023 was we were out of commission for a month with the ability to adopt out animals. We've also had some staffing challenges, as everybody else has. We have been struggling both in 2022 and 2023 to fill our animal control or field service officer positions. At one point, early in 2023, we were operating with only 2 FSOs to service the entire county. We are currently at 3 FSOs with an offer made to a 4th. And one of the really great things that we just were able to include is that our HR and our legal team has evaluated the requirements to hire animal control officers, noting that since we are not commissioned anymore, that we do not have to undergo some of the same background items that law enforcement have to do. And so this will greatly increase our chances of hiring, as well as the time it takes to onboard somebody. So with the current processes in place before we could remove the psych as well as the polygraph test, it was actually taking us anywhere between 3 and 6 months to get a candidate through the background process before we could make an actual offer and begin employment. With removing those 2 items, we can greatly speed up the process of hiring in general. Programs and services. So most people, when they think of animal services, right, they think of humane law enforcement, strays, maybe adoption sometimes, and licensing, right? But there are so many other things that Joint Animal Services provides the community and programs that we offer. And it includes a number of different things, as you can see up on the screen, from adoption programs, advocacy, foster, community cat, roof over rover, veterinary care, pet pantry. And it's not just our own pet pantry. We also provide food to the Thurston County Food Bank, as well as Concern for Animals, to help with their programs to give food for people who can't afford pet food for their pets. So some of these programs, for example, our volunteer program, they are the lifeblood of our shelter. We couldn't do the programs that we do without them. And currently, their service hours equivalent to over $200,000 worth of time that they are giving to our shelter just this year. So we have the equivalent volunteer hours of over 2 full-time staff members, where we have volunteers doing laundry, walking dogs. They also help in the surgery suite. So there's a great many positions for them to offer. Our foster program is another great way that we expand the number of animals in our care. And currently, last year, we had over 247 animals in foster. We distribute between 60 and 75 vouchers to the community that pay for their spay neuter, which equivalates to anywhere between 700 and 900 vouchers a year that help provide low-cost spay neuter to community members. This is done in conjunction with 2 other nonprofit agencies that help provide the funding for that. Our Roof Over Rover program is also a really phenomenal program that we offer. And that is basically providing dog houses to people who are in need of shelter for their dog that is outside, and perhaps they cannot afford to do so. This is usually a program that's utilized by our animal control officers the most. They get called on a welfare call, go out, check on the condition of the animal and talk with the owner. And sometimes the simplest solution is for us to provide a dog house. And then we have basically solved that issue because it was mainly that the animal did not have shelter that was the concern. Our reunification program, so we are very heavily on social media when it comes to our lost animals and intake, both posting all the animals that come into our shelter, as well as posting any lost or found animals in the community on social media. We also work closely with several groups in the community that network these animals to help reunite them with their owners. Our community cat program was launched last year. We received an $18,000 grant from Best Friends Animal Society to help launch this program. And since its inception, we have put 75 cats through the program already, where they were spay and neutered, vaccinated, and returned to the area that they were found. This was instead of the previous way of handling things, which was to, in essence, capture and kill, but not solving the actual issue in the area. So it's a multifaceted program where we actually are going into the area, seeing if there's reasons for these cats to be here, reaching out to community members who are perhaps trying to care for these animals, but need help with spay or neuter as the option. And we do have our emergency housing program as well. This is utilized a lot with incarcerations as well as hospitalizations. So when somebody does not have a place for their pet to go, they can come to us for 3 days, which can sometimes be renewed depending on the situation, giving that person time to find placement for the animal, especially if they're the only ones who were caring for that animal at the time. Our owner surrender and rehoming program. So we have started to take a more holistic approach, and this has been since 2021, where we really work to have appointment-based surrenders. And this is so that we can provide information, including resources to people who are looking to surrender their pets. We give them resources for behavior and training, veterinary care, and we also give them resources to be able to rehome their pets themselves, knowing that they don't want to necessarily surrender the pet to the shelter. And so we give them trusted sites that we know are safe places for them to rehome their pets online. And prior to implementation, about 41% of all of our intakes were owner surrenders. Now, about 24% of our intake is owner surrenders, thanks to this holistic approach. I also wanted to present your proposed assessment for 2024. This is a rough breakdown of what the jurisdictions would be paying as part of their assessment for the year. Currently, Thurston County's proposed assessment has increased only 3% from 2023. This is, of course, the assessments are done on a per capita basis, and you can see the breakdown where Thurston County is 50.1% of total population that is serviced by joint animal services. I also wanted to include in this that since we have been struggling with staffing, and with staffing meaning we have not been able to provide the after hours on call, both in 2023 and then currently in the proposed 2024 budget, we are doing a rebate for the field to all the jurisdictions, since no one was able to receive services of the after hours on call or the benefits of the 2 additional staff members. So Thurston County's rebate for this year is proposed to be a little over $130,000, with the total rebate going to all the jurisdictions of $260,000.
I'm sorry, what's the 185 then?
185 was last year's rebate. So when we proposed the 2023 budget, we offered a rebate of 185.
And then this year it's 95 because in June you started this field service.
We're actually giving a rebate more than we did last year, because we were down to 2 at one point, staff members. So we had more of a rebate to distribute this year than we did last year.
So the 185 was the total from last year for all the jurisdictions?
Correct. Thurston County received 94 of that
Oh, I
185.
see, and now going to the next year, it'll be 130, okay.
Yes.
Mm.
Looking differently at the breakdown of your assessment, which your assessment total is $942,758. I wanted to break down what that assessment pays for as far as the different departments within Joint Animal Services. So 52% of your assessment actually goes to shelter operations, which is overarchingly the care of the animals, and the standard of care that we provide to make sure that we are not spreading disease, both from a herd standpoint as well as zoonotic diseases, meaning contagious to people. About 24% of that is designated towards field, which is your animal control officers. 18% is general services, which is the administrative portion of that. That includes any consultants, contracts, administrative services that are being provided to Joint Animal Services. And then there's a small portion of restricted grants that is actually in the overall budget. Those are paid for actually within reserves. And so it is not a full portion that you guys are actually paying. It's when you look at the jurisdictional assessment, that's the bigger page that you should have been provided with all the jurisdictional breakdowns that look like this. It shows a much larger breakdown of how that works. And then licensing, of course, is at no cost to the jurisdictions to provide. But all jurisdictions, including Thurston County, part of their assessment is offset from the revenue of their licensing. So even though it is of no cost to administer, all the jurisdictions do receive a reduction in their assessment for revenues generated with licensing.
And back when Thurston County we weren't getting this field service, I mean, we weren't paying for field services or the same level of field services.
You were
Was
paying
that-
for a different level.
Was that just taking the orange 24%, or how was that calculated? Back
So, back in the day, back in 2003, how it was originally calculated is they took the top calls that equivalated at that time to half of the call volume. And so those were the calls that were removed out of the field portion, and then they calculated that reduction as to Thurston County's part of the assessment. So it ended up being pulled out completely and done in its own fashion, like done in its own calculation that wasn't a per capita, where you guys were paying for a third of total cost to run the field department, and the other jurisdictions were paying 2/3. But the modified services were determined by pulling out your largest call volume that at that time Animal Services was going to. Those calls have shifted, so it would most likely not be those same calls today.
What do you mean the calls have shifted?
So for example, barking dog was one of the high level of calls that Joint Animal Services went out on in 2003. So that was one of the calls types
In
that we pulled
2003?
in 2003 when the original modified
okay,
services. That would be a call, for example, that was pulled because of the high call volume. That is not a higher like a higher call number today, meaning we don't get as many calls on that.
What is it today?
Our largest is stray.
How would a shift in the kind of call equate to a difference in calculating Thurston County? I mean, again, I'm trying to understand the old system. Is that because one type of call occurs more frequently in Thurston
Yes.
County than in the city?
No, it was based off of how they could reduce the number of calls to equal what Thurston County was willing to pay. So it was a reduction in service to match what Thurston County
In
was
terms
willing
of
to pay.
deciding what types of calls we would pay for?
Nobody is around from 2003 to ask how that was determined originally. I have a packet with some historical information of how they deliberated and talked about it. But I cannot speak to the decision-making around what calls were chosen, except for knowing that they chose higher volume calls that were pulled to reduce the amount of overall call volume we were servicing.
So to redo that today, it might be a different set of calls that we choose. If we were trying to hit the same dollar amount, it would might,
Correct.
or if we wanted the same calls responded to, the dollar amount might, or the proportions might shift because
Correct.
the call volumes have shifted amongst the different types.
Correct.
I think I got that.
Do you provide services for Rainier or Tenino?
We provide services to Yelm because we have a contract with Yelm. We do not provide services to Rainier, Bucota, or Tenino because we do not have contracts with them as incorporated entities. So as a town or city, once you are incorporated, you are responsible for providing animal control, whether that's contracting with us or creating your own. So Tenino actually does have a code enforcement officer, and Public Works is responsible for housing if they have an issue. Rainier has their own animal control. I am unsure about Bucota.
On this 942,000, is that what you got in 2022 or 2023?
The 942 presented to you today, let me see if I can move. That is for this year's upcoming 2024.
It is the upcoming amount?
It is the upcoming amount. It is a 3% increase
over
from,
what we've been paying. Is that
correct.
right? Okay, so I'm just trying to get a little historical perspective on it. So, do you recall the number, what was last year, and then we bumped it up the year before? Is that?
So I'm looking at our payment history in Munis for animal services. In 2022, the county paid $936,060. In fiscal year 21, this is while you were still at the lower amount, the county paid $683,096. This year, we budgeted $1,024,000, but with the rebate, it will be less.
I believe it's 914.
Okay.
Give or take.
So we haven't paid for the whole year yet, the invoices coming quarters. So we're gonna pay less than the $1 million that you budgeted.
The 936 that includes the rebate we got, right?
The 936 was for 2022.
Yeah. And there was a rebate in 2022, you
In
said.
2023. Oh, yes.
Of 94,000, right?
Yes, but it went to the 2023 budget. Because we we proposed the full service and that was the 936. Once we knew we were not going to meet the staffing levels, we incorporated a rebate into 2023's budget.
So it's on a lag.
Yes.
So is that, I'm not great with, so does that explain why I am wondering why we budgeted over $1 million if the budget is 936?
We receive a budget from, or a estimate of what our budget will be from Animal Services. And remember, we do our budgets in July by state law. So we get an estimate from them. That's what we put in the budget. But once their final numbers come out, look, you're in deliberations right now and they're only just about to share their budget with their board.
Tonight.
So they haven't fixed the amount yet. So our budget is actually going to be, what we actually pay out is less than what we had in our budget
But the budget,
by about $100,000.
okay, and you're saying that the 942, that's projected for 2024.
Correct.
Does that include some kind of lag to rebate?
It does include the lagged rebate. That is the 130 of the 260,000.
So I guess my question is, when we get back to a normal,
Fully staffed.
fully staffed, no one's getting rebated, what would our share look like? 1.1 million or?
If you were basing it on this year's budget, and everybody was fully staffed, it would have been 1,670,000 roughly.
1,600,000?
But then you do the reductions from licenses and you have to take all those out.
Yes.
Um,
There's, the more licenses you sell in Thurston County, and Thurston County's license is actually less than the other jurisdictions. So there's licensing. You guys also receive a portion of adoptions as well as a portion of reclaims to incentivize residents to adopt and reclaim their pets. You also, there are shared revenue aspects that get deducted out of the full amount. So all the contracts that we hold, such as Yelm and JBLM, contracts that go toward shared revenue that reduce jurisdictional assessments. So any sort of revenue that we generate from outside jurisdictional adoptions, adoption promotions, all of that.
So the answer to the question I'm trying to ask, between 942 and 1.67 million.
1.07.
yeah, it's not 1.6. It's
No, it's
1.067.
Yeah.
Thank you. Where I was going.
No,
Yeah,
it's,
Okay, well, that's a little
It dropped to
closer.
zero.
I was like,
yeah, no. It would be 1.067.
Oh, okay, you were
Does
giving
that
me
make
a hard.
sense?
Yeah, that's why I was saying, don't you reduce stuff from that?
Right,
So-
but that would be fully staffed.
Right.
1.06.
I would also note that this budget has no increased staffing asks for anybody because we want to make sure that we're filling positions that we do have vacant, such as our field service officers. We just, like I said, offered a contingent offer to a veterinarian, so we would only also have left to hire a vet tech to assist the veterinarian. So we are not asking for additional staff, knowing that we have, staffing positions to fulfill.
Let's go ahead and get through the rest of the presentation. Go ahead.
I am trying to scroll it. There we go. Okay, we're good. We got it. So I also did want to talk a little bit about statistics so you can understand where some of the funding is going as part of your assessments. So animal intake this year, overall, animal services has seen a 20% increase in intake. And when you divide it out amongst contracts as well as jurisdictions as part of the ILA, 30%, there's a 30% increase in unincorporated Thurston County. So of the total overall 20% increase, Thurston County alone has seen a 30% increase over last year in animals coming into the shelter system. That equivalates to currently, and year-to-date is as of September 30th. That includes over 1,000 animals, which breaks down into 687 cats, 316 dogs, and 102, which we classify as other, which would be pocket pets, reptiles, and 63 chickens that we worked with TCSO for a potential cockfighting case. I did want to note that as far as our call volume, this chart shows an increase of 11% in calls responded to in 2022 over 2021. So we did see an increase in calls when we moved to full services or same services for all jurisdictions. And Thurston County went from that same flip. So in 2021, you were 30% of our calls. Since we have moved to full service, you are now 41% of our overall calls. So we did see a shift in call type and call response to Thurston County when we moved to full service. This year's response numbers have only been about a 4% increase overall from 2022. But we have seen an overall increase in field response as a whole to jurisdictions by about 10%. And the other thing I did want to talk about today as far as statistics and call volume, we have always been cognizant. We have quarterly meetings with TCSO and several of their commanders. And one of the things brought up was some concerns about our response levels. And so we asked TCOM to provide the number of calls that they have received for unincorporated Thurston County. And we compared those calls to our call data to see where there was perhaps any barriers or any issues of calls getting to Joint Animal Services. And so when we asked TCOM for their numbers, you will note that they presented us with an overall call volume of what is titled animal calls. They received 660 calls that were an animal response type call. We are admitting some of these calls out of those numbers for a couple of reasons. Some are because it's not a jurisdiction that we as Joint Animal Services serve. So a call coming into Tenino, Rainier, Yokota. We also admitted information-only calls. There's a lot of people who call into TCOM and say, hey, I've lost my dog, or hey, I have found a dog. I just wanted you to know in case somebody calls. 11 of the calls that we removed were actually initiated by TCSO because they were on scene at the time. And 7 of the calls were miscellaneous, so some duplicates, some mental health calls, or calls that absolutely just had no information about it, so no one could respond to. So looking at that data, once you omit the 82, there were 570 animal type calls in 2022. 223 of those involved a pet animal. So in other words, a call that Joint Animal Services would respond to. And a pet animal also includes when a dog attacks livestock. 182 of those calls were livestock only calls, so not having to do with any sort of pet animal involvement. And then the 173 were wildlife calls, those spanning anything from there are deer in the road, there is a mountain lion in my yard, to I have perhaps seen an injured coyote in the park. And just as a reminder, of these, we would have only responded to the 223 of those calls. So when you look at that breakdown, of the 223, 128 of those were during our normal operation hours, and 95 were after hours calls. And so since this was 2022, we had not gone to after hours on call yet due to staffing. And digging deeper into that, 102 of those calls, we did not receive at all. So that is where the discrepancy to us was concerning. Now, overall, that equates to about 1% of our calls for Thurston County, but 102 calls that did not make it to us that we would have responded to is still a high enough number for us to be concerned. So we again went to TCOM to compare data to see what were the reasons for those. And in talking with TCOM, the number one reason is because when people call emergency services, they are told to hang up and call us. And so you can imagine when somebody is in the middle of an animal attacking them, or a dog attacking their livestock, or something that's urgent, or perhaps even frustrating, if they are told to hang up and call somebody else, those calls aren't getting to us. Those were documented calls that went to TCOM that we cannot find anywhere in our system, which means we never got them. One of the other reasons, so that was the main reason that we found over that. And one of the solutions that we actually came up with TCOM is they have actually instituted with their new phone system, there is a transfer button, and so they have connected the transfer button to us that also would be answered by our after-hours on-call. So instead of saying you need to hang up and call animal services, they can literally just transfer the call to us.
And when did that start, Sarah?
That just started a few weeks ago. We received an email from TCOM. So this is new. They are still training everybody on how, their operators on how that works.
When they do that and nobody's available at JASCOM, what's it go to, a recording or?
There is, if it's during operational hours and all of our phone lines, like all of our operators are on a call, it will go to a voicemail. If it's after hours, it gets sent to our officer's emergency line.
And then do they pick that up?
They
So
do.
they're like on a on-call
They
situation?
are on call. That was why we were not able to implement it sooner. Because of the on-call portion, I could not have on-call hours when I only had 2 staff members in the field department.
So when did you start the on-call?
June 3rd,
So that is still relatively new as well.
we were able to have enough staffing. We were at, when we moved to that, we were at 66%, so we had 4 staff members able to rotate that. We have since lost one of the FSOs, but we are still maintaining it on 3 right now.
So how often do you go out, or how many calls have you been out on since June, I guess? I mean,
It varies, but probably no more than, I would say 1 to 2 a week are emergency calls that we go out on. And that is law enforcement. You know, if any of our law enforcement, so OPD, LPD, TCSO, get a call in the middle of the night, there are animals involved, that would be a call that we respond to.
So, okay, so it seems like there's 2 issues that we've kind of heard about or wondered about. Like, one is the connecting up to you guys, and we've kind of gone through that.
Right.
The other one is, once you are guys connected, the categories of things that you don't respond to, you know. Not our business, not our contract, not our field. So I'm trying to get a sense of that and making sure there's not a misunderstanding between sheriff, commissioners, JASCOM. So wildlife, so it has to be a pet animal.
Correct.
If it's wildlife or livestock, that's just not gonna happen.
Not currently, no.
Okay, so pets. Second thing is emergency situations, and you've described categories. Is that only after hours? But if it's during the business day, you would respond
respond
to
to-
non-emergency?
Correct.
Okay,
The on-call is, we have categorized that with emergency response on-call. So if, you know, somebody is calling at 3 a.m. because the neighbor's dog is barking, we would take the information, but we would most likely not respond to that call until
because it's
the
an
morning when we
after-hours
have-
non-emergency.
correct.
And
But we still would respond just that following morning.
it feels like, looking at the list on your slide, it felt like what's emergency is kind of similar to what Thurston County was paying for in the past, like 24 hours, which is a person's potentially gonna get bit, another animal's being attacked, or you said agency assist. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but
Agency assist is like if law enforcement calls us and needs us, we would go. If the fire department called us and needed us, we would go. Those would be, that's emergent, that's agency assist.
and from your perspective, are there, whether you're talking to county manager, a commissioner on the board, we've all been on the board, sheriff, is there a misunderstanding about like the coverage? I just want to make sure we're really clear about what's covered, what's not covered, you know, so that no one thinks you're covering something, you're not covering it, or vice versa. Do you feel like there's a category of stuff that we expected that we need to be, like, you can help us set the record straight, that that's not part of what we're gonna respond to, and Thurston County keeps seeming to think that we're going to? Where's those friction points been most frequent?
I think that, and that's a fantastic question to answer. And I think there has been a lot of discrepancy around just we assist if it's an animal, period. That seems to be where the confusion lies, that it's any animal. We do not have the capabilities, what resources, housing, all of that to respond to calls that are outside of that pet animal category. And that pet animal category is actually still quite broad. But we do not have the financial resources or the facility resources to have to handle livestock or to handle wildlife. We do not have housing for wildlife, for example, and we don't have a rehabilitation license with the state. So even when sometimes people do end up bringing us, usually baby orphaned possums, raccoons, something like that, if we do not find placement for them within 24 hours, we have to euthanize them. And so we don't have, the state training licensing to handle wildlife calls.
When I see that bear on Evergreen campus, don't call you.
Yeah. I would say that's where most of the confusion lies. And I don't know if it would be beneficial to not just the county, but to all of our, because with our contractual jurisdictions like Yelm, it's laid out exactly what we do and don't do as part of that contract. Our ILA is very broad, but it covers pet animals in the ILA. So I don't know if perhaps in the future, an actual outlined contract, or at least a scope of service of what animal services provides to the jurisdictions might help with some of that clarification.
Go ahead.
So you don't have 24-hour service, right?
I have 24 on-call service for emergencies.
On call for emergency. Is that 7 days a week?
Yes.
Okay.
And we even have officers that do regular calls during the day on Sunday and Monday when we are closed. So between 7:30 and 6 p.m., even on Sundays and Mondays when we're closed, we actually have an officer responding to calls on those as well.
So the building is closed, but there's
We are
someone
still
responding to
Yes.
regular calls.
So we respond
Holidays as well?
holidays, we have somebody on call at bare minimum.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first one is, as we're making these considerations, if the county were to scale back, right? Say we wanted to go back to the same level of service from 2021. I'm just wondering what that looks like.
I think I would not be able to give you that budget point today. I think that is a longer budgetary discussion, and one that would have to go over what services would be provided and what that would look like.
Right now, though, we're doing 51% going to the county or something. Is that, is that what you said earlier, that the county is?
50.1% of all the assessments.
So
You are
51%.
50.
What'd you say, 50?
50%.
50%, basically, okay.
So, okay, but if the county let, because we're going through our own budget decisions right now, and so we are to have this conversation, we're gonna scale back. I'm wondering, right, you're saying it's gonna be a longer discussion, but if we're setting the budget, how that will work out, how does it look and process more is kind of what I'm asking.
Sure, so
of
the
that.
the process would look like a discussion with Thurston County on what services are important for us to provide. There is also, it has to go to the Joint Animal Services Commission for any change in the ILA. Because a change in service is a change in the ILA, and the Joint Animal Services Commission has to vote on those changes as well.
But say theoretically, if we went back to where we were before, so you just respond to the UGA areas, is that the way it was? It was just the UGA?
No, we respond to all incorporated Thurston County. There just was certain call types we would not respond to. That includes dangerous dog designations. If you remember, the commissioners were responsible for designating dangerous dogs up until we took full service.
It'd be kind of like, not exactly, but kind of like only getting emergency service around the clock. Whereas now we get full service during business hours and emergency service after hours. But it could differ based on the cost of that might be not, it might you have to scale back from there. If we're aiming at a money target, we might have to scale back from there because the calls are different, or we might be able to just do what we did before, but it wouldn't be quite the same savings, is what I heard Sarah describe. We'd have to recalculate the call volume and profiles and what we were paying for and what we weren't.
And then another piece of this would be what's gonna happen when you finally reach that point of you've got no room for anything else and we have to build or move or, you know, and I know that's talked about as well. So any idea when that's all gonna take place? Because that'll take input from all the different jurisdictions at a dollar amount, I suppose,
Absolutely.
to make that happen.
And we have been working with a consultant. Animal Arts was just awarded a contract to do a space needs assessment to actually define what space size cost looks like, because we don't want to go to the jurisdictions without a better understanding of what our needs are. And that includes an assessment of what the needs of the entire area are. So the space needs assessment does not just include, let's say they say, I need a larger shelter, right? It's going to include the community is telling us these services are needed, which means in order to provide that, this is the size facility with these programs and the staffing in order to provide the services asked by the community or needed by the community. But we are not projecting an actual building being built, or I should say the start of a building being built until the end of 2026, 2027. It's in there. And so all of this currently is the preemptive work to figure out what it is we need. We even have a plan built in to look at funding sources. So there is a feasibility study on what the residents can give or are willing to give or participate in the scope of a new building. What other areas are there for us to get money from? Is that grant funding? Is there federal grant money? What are all the ways that we can look at funding so it's not just the responsibility of the jurisdictions?
Thank you. I want to ask about, you know, when we decided to go for the full contract, it was because we'd heard from our sheriff's office and the impact that they're facing, right? And as we've had this contract, we've still heard that they're having to respond to these calls. You mentioned maybe there was a disconnect with TCOM on that. But I'm wondering, how is that going to get better, right? Because we're being put in this position, right? And we're hearing very loud and clear, and I know that in conversations with the sheriff, he's collecting the data of all the calls that his officers have to respond to that JASCOM is not responding to. And so I'm seeing there's also a disconnect there. And so I'm wondering, like, how is that relationship going to improve? I don't.
I think it's, that is definitely something for you to consider. There are a couple of points that I did not bring up in my presentation that are definitely barriers for us to be doing our job. For example, we have not been given citation booklets for Thurston County this entire year, nor has the approval for us to be on sector in replacement of the citation booklets. Thurston County is the only jurisdiction that we provide services to that has not provided us the ability to write citations. So while I do understand that the perception is that the officers are getting called out still, currently, since we have no ability to write a citation, we do actually have to call a TCSO officer to come out and write a citation for a barking dog failure to license. There are also specific call types that TCSO has told TCOM that they still would like to be called out on. For example, a dog in traffic. That would be for us considered a dog at large. I am assuming because it is an imminent danger, the dog being in traffic, TCSO has asked that they still receive a call so that they can respond as well. I would also say that since the beginning of 2022, I'm so sorry. Beginning of 2022, when some initial concerns came up, we started meeting with TCSO quarterly to address any concerns. Our quarterly meetings, once we implemented the after hours on call, was always the main concern. Since we have implemented that, the sheriff's deputies, both chiefs and commanders that attend, have not told us of any concerns or addressed any concerns with us in those quarterly meetings.
Thank you. Can you go back to the citation? Is that something that's given by, like, the sheriff's office or the police departments?
Yes, it is. So for Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, it is their department that provides those citation booklets to us. They're civil infraction books. Since 2021, with SB 5051, since we are no longer commissioned,
What's that? Senate Bill
Senate Bill 5051,
5051?
that happened back in 2021. That is when our special commissions, it was advised for our special commissions to be removed because of that bill. So we still provide civil infractions. We, however, prefer, and have always done so even with, say, our special commission was removed in 2021, even with our special commissions, once we got any kind of criminal activity, neglect, abuse, even with our commissions, we still called law enforcement out with us to serve a warrant for safety, as well as because it's a criminal citation. So that is how we still handle it, even without our special commissions. We give civil infractions with our citation books up into they are criminal, and then we partner with the jurisdiction that the issue is for us to write a warrant and go seize the animal or recommend charges to the prosecuting attorney after that. But it is as a partnership. But yeah, we have not had any civil infraction books from Thurston County since the beginning of the year. we also had asked to be sector because technically that is how all law enforcement agencies distribute their citations now. The other jurisdictions have asked if we could be added to sector. There is, according to sector, no reason for us not to be on it. They do need overarching approval from Sheriff Sanders in order to be put on it.
What is sector?
Sector is basically now, instead of having civil infraction books, it's an online system to write those citations and to track them.
I want to talk about the livestock, because that is, I feel like that's a very unique county issue rather than a city issue is the livestock. And a lot of the calls that are coming in is because there's a horse in the middle of the road, or there's a cow in the middle of the road, or something along those lines. And just seeing, I've seen kind of like an uptick in those calls and need for those services, right? And you said that's not something that you would do now. And so understanding that the lack of space is a big issue, right? So you're not going to be, but if it's something where it's maybe just assisting moving the livestock out of the roadway, or I don't know, could there be some coordination in those efforts, seeing that
Almost half the calls.
almost, we're
Were
seeing a
for
big, yeah,
livestock.
we're seeing this,
I was shocked by that number that you gave
Um,
versus pets, 223 pet, 182 livestock.
Yeah.
So no wonder we're getting a lot of unhappy people if they're just being told, no, livestock, not our problem. And that's the rural animal issue.
That's kind of your point, right?
yeah, that's like, that's our
Is there any chance we could use the fairground building to put something, or, you know, is there a corral over there?
I think it is something that we can talk about. There are, like I said, resource constraints. It's not just the building. Equine management and care is not a minor expense. And there's also a lot more liability around the handling of equine. And so we are not unwilling to have those discussions. But because it is a county-centric issue, that would definitely have to be a different conversation that is an outside contract, probably not within the ILA.
Do you have relationships with like the backcountry horsemen, those type of groups that are affiliated, that type of animal?
We have a good relationship with Heartsy, which is Hooved Animal Rescue.
So they can't help you out, like some of this.
Heartsy's very specific mission. They only house animals that have been seized by TCSO. But again, it is, while there are potential foster homes for livestock equine to go to, the liability of having, yes, please. The liability of having an animal that is unowned in on somebody's property could do injury or damage, not to mention the expectation for them to take on the cost of care for that animal, which means we would be providing food and veterinary care for that animal, right? And then there's the liability of that animal being housed on that person's property. And those are all very distinct issues. And one of the reasons, you know, again, I know this is livestock and I'm going to refer to an animal that's a pet animal. There's specific laws and liability in that time frame where we have like a stray animal that is not ours and we're waiting for somebody to claim it. There are certain things you can and can't do in liability around that. And I would, as an agency, have concerns with ranchers taking on all of those responsibilities without having the ability to provide them food, veterinary care, as well as the increased costs of liability around that. Those would be some of my concerns initially, which is why I say I'm willing to talk about it and come up with a plan and what do those costs look like, because equine care is much different than pet care.
Go ahead.
And this is on a completely different than what we've been talking about. So talk a little about license fees and how, I'd like to know how license fees impact what the county pays and how Thurston County's license fees compare to the cities.
So Thurston County's licenses right now are less than half of what the jurisdiction license fees are.
And what is that dollar?
If they are altered, excuse me, if they're altered, a cat is $8 and a dog is $12. For the county, for the cities, that $12 fee is actually $22. So there is a huge difference in that licensing, and that is one of those direct revenues that directly impacts each jurisdiction depending on the sale of licenses. Since you have the largest per capita at 50% of the assessments, it could be beneficial in reducing your overall assessment cost by increasing your license cost to match the cities. The second being, the more a jurisdiction promotes and ensures that the animals of their area are being licensed, that increases those sales as well and then directly impacts your assessment.
So if our costs are less, but is our per capita volume also less, or is it just the fact that we're charging less?
That you're charging less.
So if we were charging the same as cities, we'd have a proportionate equal.
I think a couple of years ago, I had said there would, I had calculated there would be roughly a $30,000 increase to sales, which would then, that would equivalent then to the assessment reduction.
Back when I was on the board, I know the auditor wanted to be involved and I connected you guys and I can't remember what came out of that, if anything.
With me as well,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a little bit of discrepancies of how we would handle things and access to our current database, as well as the like charge us a fee for doing that.
So it kind of feels like,
I would, the assessor want to charge, I'm not sure.
Auditor?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the auditor.
Oh.
Yeah, that was my bad. I'm so
Yeah, not
sorry.
the assessor.
I was like, what does the assessor have to do with this?
Can we
auditor.
bill it through property
That
tax?
was
to
like-
answer?
The auditor, in order to help with sale of license, would charge a fee.
Would that be like a couple dollars or what would it be, you know? Don't know.
I do not.
And do you issue licenses at your office now?
We do, and we also have an online
Process?
licensing system as well.
How much are you collecting from the county residents? How many annual licenses for dogs or cats?
I can tell you revenue at this moment, and revenue-wise, it, well, pardon me, the less direct revenues includes, it's not just licensing, it's also adoption and reclaim. So I can't give you that exact number now, but I could email Robin with those numbers.
Interesting to know what
No, absolutely.
And would you be able to handle that if we doubled the fee, for an example? That wouldn't have any effect.
No, it just is a simple
Just
change
more
in our system. I would also say that communications from the county standpoint of the benefits of licensing and working, I personally think all the jurisdictions, not just the county, I think Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Thurston County, as well as Joint Animal Services, should have more joint communications around licensing and adopting a pet, because the more awareness that we bring to it, it also then increases those revenues to be distributed to the jurisdictions.
What does that cost somebody to have a chip put in?
We don't currently microchip. We do as part of the adoption process. But for a veterinarian currently, it is, to do the process, it's usually $35 for the chip and then a $50 to $75 office visit.
Installation fee or something?
You could call it that.
I kind of want to go back to the calls that you've
Absolutely.
received, if that's okay. In terms of, you said you received 223 calls that involved a pet animal.
It was through TCOM.
911 did.
That was through TCOM.
Okay.
We've received 977 calls.
In the county area.
Correct.
So 977. And what do those calls involve? Like, what are you responding to?
Mostly, I would say, would be strays and dogs at large. Second to that would be rates, which usually involves menacing as well. And then those would be our main ones that we respond most to in the county. I can get you a full breakdown and pull that from our system that actually breaks down the calls for you.
I think that would just be great to
Sure.
see as kind of like what are the top 5 at least, like that, out of those 977 calls that, we're responding to. And
Out of the 977, does that include what Capcom receives? Is that a total? Or is that separate?
In some, I would say the 103 calls that we did not receive are not included in that number because we never received them.
Okay, otherwise, that's a total of what you received at your phone
Correct,
versus Capcom, okay.
correct. There was 121, 123 calls that were both TCOM received and that we received. So that 123 would be included in the 977.
okay.
So, to wrap this up, in the past, like 7 or 8 years ago, Jazzcom used to come in. This is to your comment about promoting adoption of pets. Jazzcom would come in, maybe twice a year to a Tuesday afternoon meeting, with a
Hey, Pat,
adoptable pet, just in the presentation time, just come in to promote adoption. I don't know if the board would be interested in that. It was always a fun moment in a board meeting.
Commissioner Messer is ready to adopt.
They had a really cute black
I
dog
almost-
puppy a couple weeks ago.
There was one that I still recall that I probably should have home with me, but, if you're interested, we could start doing that again and find a time early next year
Talk about licensing and
to
adoption.
talk about
Absolutely.
licensing and adoption in a presentation part of the meeting.
We're always happy to do any of those at the request of the commission. I would also suggest at the beginning of the year, once your other newly appointed commission members have joined you. I would invite everybody to come down for a tour of the facility, both to just see the facility in general and also to see our new medical building. The city of Olympia has come down, we had the city council come down and tour the facility. And we have also extended invitations to the city of Tumwater and the city of Lacey to come down and tour. And I would highly encourage, at the beginning of next year, for everybody to come do that.
Maybe we could do a little tour day.
Yeah.
And go to, different committee places that we, like Orca, Animal Services, Lot,
Oh, yeah, that would be a fun day.
IT could take us around.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for us? All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, break.
Yes, so we're breaking until 1:30.
Perfect. We're on break until 1:30 and then we'll be back.